always say every 3-point hitch should have one. It makes your 3-point hitch absolutely useful. Otherwise, you can only use your mower or your 3-point hitch or your plow or your 3-point hitch. You got to take one off. It's a pain in the butt. You can't use anything else, and you got to swap things. It's always nice to have one in the front, one in the back for weight and for counterbalance. It opens up a whole different world. This is our selector valve kit style 1 location. Style 3 we have is mounted underneath by the foot platform. So it's the same purpose, just a different location. Depending on your tractor model is or the foot floorboards, you can put them here. Or normally, if you engage this lever here, your mower deck would go up, and if you had 3-point hitch, so would your 3-point hitch at the same time. And if you push down, they both would go down at the same time. With the factory setup, that's how it works, and it's kind of inconvenient. Line off your belly cylinder bottom and get the line off your 3-point bottom. At one point you may have to install the provided fittings onto your cylinders. So depending on what you got for fittings on your cylinders, on your 3-point hitch and your belly cylinder, you may have to use the adapters provided. So the one on the 3-point hitch for this one is your pipe thread and your JIC. So the flare end of the JIC is what our new hoses connect to. The pipe end goes into your fitting on your hydraulic cylinder. If your hydraulic cylinder has pipe thread fitting, if you've got a JIC fitting that's male, you're all set. If yours is female JIC and not pipe, you're going to need a different adapter. Most of them have pipe in there, but you're going to have to check. This pipe thread is called, on these fittings, is called NPTF. It's a national pipe thread, but it's a fuel thread. It's a little different than regular pipe thread. It's not just tapered, but it's got a little bit of interference, I guess is the best way to describe it, thread to it. We don't use any dope on hydraulics or tape. You don't need it. Hydraulic fittings do not need it. And you don't want that stuff in your hydraulic system. You want to keep everything clean when you're working with hydraulics. Keep it kind of brake clean and your air hose handy. And these are, again, the pipe thread. You want to kind of make sure she's pretty tight because it seals through the threads. Be mindful, there's usually a long piece of pipe extension here, and you don't want to snap that. You have a lot of leverage on it right now, and there's only a few threads engaging on the bottom of that cylinder. Also, the nice thing with our hoses being swivels on both ends, say you don't get this tight enough and it's leaking, all you got to do is just loosen our hose a little bit and you can crank the fitting. You don't need to take the hose all the way off and then mess with the fitting. So it's really a huge benefit to have swivels on all ends. And the little pressure these are on, the circuits are usually 500 to 1,000 pounds in these machines, depending if you got a loader or a 4100 series or 400, 4000, whatever. They're not huge on the lift circuit for PSI, so leaks are usually not all that much of a problem as long as you got good seals on everything. The next fitting we're going to go to is on our belly cylinder, and that is usually going to be the JIC male to male. You can see both are flared males, and this is usually the adapter that goes to the bottom of most of these belly cylinders. As you can see, it's threaded in my hand. Both sides are the same. And this is, again, these two are the only fittings you want to tighten up right now. Everything else with this project you want on hand tight. That way you can line all your hoses and line fittings up and stuff. So just these two adapters right now, that cap, are the only things that go on that are not just finger tight. Very important to keep everything else loose after you do this step in the cap. So snug this up pretty good. You don't need to go crazy because these seal at the flare, not the threads. And then the last fitting from your kit you're going to use right now is the cap. Depending on if you've got 45s here or 90s or straights, you're going to depend where you put your cap on. But the hose that is coming from here, normally these T-fittings are getting threaded on to straight fitting. They're obviously vertical, 90 degrees, and we usually cap the bottom So right now we're just going to loosely do that with the 45 because we may have to change the fitting up top or change the orientation of this T, but that's where we're at now. So what you do now, you're going to replace the hoses we just took off with the ones provided in the kit. Okay, so what you're going to do is take the one with the straight fitting, not the 90 degree, the straight 3/8 pipe threading. This one goes to your 3-point hitch. Onto the adapter fitting that we just installed again. Take your brake clean, make sure everything's clean. And right now we're just going to thread this on loosely so it still swivels, so it's hand tight. So again, you just want this finger tight so it'll swivel still. Obviously keep the other end with the cap on if you got a cap or out of the dirt. And right now we're just going to hang this out of the way. And then we're going to go to our mid-lift hose and do the same thing with our new mid-lift hose provided with the kit. And then this one, you're going to do the same thing and route however you choose to route. You can go over this bar here if you want, under it, if you're going to tie it up off. If you want to go over, just make sure when you're going through here you keep the fitting clean. If you want to put a cap or a plug on it or a piece of tape, you can do that. Sometimes, depending on how this is, you can move it. Just don't go hossing on it because this tube will bend easily. If you get it started, you can have a little bit of option on where you want this to be when it spins around. And if it looks like the bend is okay and it's not going to rub too hard on anything, you're fine. If you'd rather go under here, you can do that too. That's too much of a bend if you see that. But that kind of takes it out of there and makes it a little bit more fluid. Again, these should go finger tight and not have much resistance when you're tightening them. You may have to wiggle the fitting a little bit, but if they're going hard, they're probably cross-threaded or there's too much angle or too much bend on the hose and it's pulling and fighting. This one I don't really care for the way it's riding, so I'm going to take it off and go underneath this rock shaft. Again, this is why we leave extra length to these hoses, because they fit different models, but also gives you options at routing, because honestly a lot of the factory hoses on these machines are really too tight and too close to things. So I prefer to do this here, and we'll just tie it up out of the way and it won't hit anything and it'll be absolutely fine. And then again, just take this hose, leave it loose, let it hang. We're going to connect the next hose to our travel control valve. It's got the 90-degree fitting on it. Loosen this a little bit, and I'm going to loosen up this top nut that seals the O-ring on there for the O-ring boss fitting. And then this gives me obviously some more room to play where these hoses are going to go, and we'll go from there. So we're going to go this route here with the last hose that's in the kit, the short one. We're going to drag on to the side here. Again, normally if this fitting is up down 90 degrees, this is coming out and this goes straight in. That's if you have a straight and out of 45 here. Alright, again we're going to keep that loose. So now we remove the plugs. And the plugs on this one we want to remove are these two and this one. So we remove these two plugs out of here. These are usually 5/16. Usually you don't need anything big to take them out most of the time. Just pop these out, you're not going to need them. So the installation location is different between the Selector valve kits. How they hook up underneath is pretty well similar. The instructions will show you, and the video shows you basically what lines go where underneath. Unlike kit number 3 on the newer tractors that goes down here on the floorboard, there's not a floorboard here, although some people have put the kit 3 on these older tractors here, and you can do that. They're a little bit in the way, so we don't like to do that on the older tractors. Location will definitely be up to you. Just keep in mind the hoses that are provided are only going to allow you so many locations, but you can get different hoses if you choose to locate it somewhere. I have seen them also here underneath. Again, your foot's kind of in the way. You got to bend down to get it. I don't like it. So we found that this is kind of our favorite location for the style tractor. You want to be mindful that you're below your hood. The hood is usually kind of around to this bolt height here, somewhere a little higher and lower. So if you're below the bottom of that bolt, you're definitely good. If you want to get as close as you can, put your hood on and figure it out. So when you're doing your placing with your hood too, put this line on and you'll see where you want to be with your hood as far as where it's going to line up, if it's going to clear. This is kicked out far enough that they usually clear pretty good, but if you want to be sure, then you can put it down lower as the hood kind of comes right about this level. You can do this and it should be fine also. Your line's going to come either down through here depending on how you do it. We did have some kits where the lines came through here as well. It would be down under here and through here, but just so you get an idea. So put the hose on and figure where you want this valve to be before you start drilling holes, obviously. So if you want it a little bit lower and to clear your hood and the hose and have no issues, that's fine. If you like it up here, it's a little handier to get to and it looks a little more cleaner, that's fine too. It's up to you. The other thing you have to be real mindful is your battery is back here. Your hydraulic tank's back here. Sometimes there's wiring. There's not a lot of room on this side if the battery's on the other side. So just be careful with your drilling and make sure you got enough room for your bolt sticking through and your nuts, and use the shortest bolt possible. That way you don't have anything coming in contact with anything. If you go down too far, you're definitely going to be in your hydraulic tank. So the hydraulic tank on this tractor is roughly right around here and below. We provide 5/16 grade 8 bolts that go through here. And then they give you some room for your nut and your washer and the thickness of everything and the washer on the back, and it doesn't leave a lot on the back side. So these holes are a little bigger than 5/16 as they should be, so the bolt passes through fine. And what we like to use are these self-centering punches. I know everybody doesn't have them, so if you got a center punch is fine. These, what they do is they get inside the hole and they'll find dead center for you, so they work out real slick. These are in 64ths, so I've got the two closest sizes that fit in these holes, and that'll give us our centering punch. If you have somebody hold this for you, it's better. That way you can sit back and look at it and whatnot, but you can definitely do it by your side. That's why I've got two in here right now, so you don't have to move the punch, move the valve as you're doing this. You try to get it as straight as you want it. Some people like an angle here, so it's facing you a little better when you go to reach for it. Also remember, you can come out a little bit more if you want. If you get on and off of your tractor on this side, it's just remember it's going to be here. So again, look behind, make sure you're clear where you're going to be. You probably can't see on the camera, but it just got the two center punches in there. The other thing to note is drilling these holes, we recommend going a little bigger than the 5/16 on the drill bit for a couple reasons. It gives you a little bit of room for error if you don't drill the holes exactly centered. It gives you a slight room for adjustment also. I think this is 11/32 bit. You can use a 3/8 or anything in between. I wouldn't recommend going much bigger than 3/8. You can use a 5/16 bit if you want to. It's just going to be a tight fit and you got to be dead on. So that's why we go 11/32, and you can always go bigger if you need to. You can never obviously go back smaller once the hole's drilled. And then go ahead and drill your holes again, double, triple check. Make sure you're not going to ever hit your battery when it's installed, and you're not going to hit your tank. You can use a pilot hole if you want, but center punch should work, and these are 135 split point bits, so they don't need a pilot hole. There we go. And make sure your valve's aligned the correct way. You have your two lines on the bottom, your one line up top, your plug facing out. Now this is probably about the lowest you're going to want to go, because you could still get a wrench or a socket on this nut, but it's a little close to the tank, but no concern. I wouldn't go much lower than this. And this is why we drill these holes a little bigger. That drill bit did move a little bit. I'm going to back this out here. If I drilled them a little bigger, they probably would go in a little easier, but It's so close, it's going to thread right in. If we used a 3/8 hole, it would have dropped right in, but it would have been a little more sloppy. I don't think we need the adjustment, but we can always open it up if we decide we need to. At this point now, you know it's going to mount where you want it. And we usually install the hoses with them sitting on here. I don't quite tighten this up yet. That way if we got to move it or pull it off or do whatever we got to do for the hoses. And then put your sleeving on the hoses and then connect your hoses. Obviously got to put the sleeving on first. This line is hooked to the travel control valve. This line goes to your bottom of your mid lift cylinder. This line goes to the bottom of your 3-point hitch cylinder. The underneath is hooked up the same as the video in the selector valve kit number 3 that mounts here. Hook everything up down below as it should be. Okay, now we're going to loosely connect these hoses where they belong. But right now we're just going to connect the lines. The first line you want to connect is the one coming from the 3-point hitch. Kind of have your routing in mind loosely where you're going to be here. Take your cap off, make sure everything's clean. Again, these are swiveled, that's a nice part. Makes this installation much easier. Now we're going to connect our 3/8 pipe thread ends into the valve. So the 3-point hitch is going to go to the rear. This is facing like this. Again, the joy of these swivels is you can start these by hand any way you want. Once the swivel starts spinning, you're probably in there far enough for what we're doing now. You don't want these very tight. We want everything loose still. And make sure your hoses are roughly where you're going to want to route them. Next, we're going to take the belly hose. Make sure that's kind of where you want it to be routed. Again, make sure everything's clean. We give you enough room with the hoses lengthwise that you can do these without having to hold it over your head in tight cramped places. Makes installation a lot easier, as these swivels are beautiful to do that too. Basically, once you get to the point you can't turn it by hand or the wrench is getting some resistance, that's plenty. Just keep it loose right now. We'll tighten them all up at the end. Now we're going to tighten up all our fittings. And obviously you don't have to watch us do everything, but you're going to want to go and do your fitting going into your 3-point hitch. So now all these get tight, final tight. And then you're going to do your fitting on your mid lift that you loosened up and connected your new hose to. And then you're going to go and do all your T fittings. So make sure your cap's tight, your line coming into your T, your swivel on your T, and also important up here if you loosened it so you can position it. This 45 worked out fine. We didn't have to change the fitting, as you can see. And the other thing, these swivels allow these lines to move and do what they got to do. Once all your lines are tightened up, then you could take the provided zip ties and mounts and tie off your hoses or run your hoses any way you want to. Obviously, try to keep them off from rubbing on anything. And you can move fittings around, and since these swivels move, you can position your hose where you want. And then when you get your hoses tightened up, then go back to your valve, and usually when you tighten these are 3/4 inch, by the way, and then your swivel will still swivel and have some play when you're tight. So just realize that. So don't think that this has to get tight on this end in order to be fully tight. On these ends, the swivel doesn't swivel anymore, on these small JIC ends, but this end will have a little bit of swivel still when they're tight. So these threads are actually doing the sealing. So these are tapered. As it gets tighter, your threads are going to seal, and you'll know it. So you want to get these pretty tight, but obviously don't get too excessive. You can always tighten them up if you got a slight leak as you're going down. This is our selector valve kit style 1 location. I'm going to show you what the valve does. So on this tractor, forward controls your forward implement, back controls your 3-point hitch back implement. Hydraulic oil is a little cold, so it's going to go slow, but you'll get the picture of what we do here. So that's our 3-point hitch selector valve kit. You can find our selector valve kits along with many other products for Case Ingersoll tractors and many other brands of garden tractors at Case Ingersoll Tractors with an S.com, as well as our eBay store, which is Case Ingersoll Tractors Northeast. But for the best prices and avoid high shipping costs and eBay fees, you can go to CaseIngersollTractors.com. And you can email us at CaseIngersollNE, as in Northeast, NE, at gmail.com. And you can find us on Facebook also at Case Ingersoll Tractors Northeast. These kits, we've got them in stock right now. The last year has been crazy, as everybody knows, and they sell out pretty quick. We use top quality fittings and top quality valve and top quality hoses, and it's a plug and play kit. And like I said, it's a pretty simple install for the average person, an hour or two at the absolute most, depending on your tools and skill set. But we can usually bang these out. And like I said, the only other difference between style 1 and style 3 is the length of the hoses, and then the valve would mount here. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.